Hello, my sober lovelies. Before we dive in, I'm really excited to announce my group coaching program for women is live, and you can join now. So excited for this because let's be real here. Quitting drinking isn't just about saying no to the glass of wine or booze. It's about what comes after. All the fear, the boredom, the late night anxiety, and the stories you've been telling yourself for years. And that's where my Rewired Sober group coaching program for women comes in. It's only $247. I'm being totally transparent on the price. It's for 3 months, and you'll learn how to shift your mindset, build habits that actually stick, and question the core beliefs that have been keeping you stuck, and find healthier ways to deal with that loneliness and that now what feeling. The best part is you don't have to do it alone. We'll have live group coaching sessions weekly, and there'll be a bunch of women walking through it with you. It's not another cookie cutter sobriety program for mommy vloggers. It's neuroscience meets real life, and it's designed for women to help you not just stay sober, but actually feel good living sober. You can join anytime, and I'd love to see you on the inside. So start today, get instant access. The link's in the show notes. Hey there, and welcome to You've Been Selected. I'm your host, Kate Vitella, and something tells me you didn't just stumble across this podcast by accident. Maybe, just maybe, you've been called here, like selected by the universe for something more. So let's get started. Hi, welcome back to another solo episode, just me, myself, and I'm going to dive into my sober journey, how I actually got sober from the very first day all the way through up until now. And I call it a journey because, well, it's all a journey, right? And I'm going to continue to evolve on this journey. But even when I was making the notes for this episode, I realized how many different twists and turns I've taken and just how I followed the breadcrumbs, essentially, from one book to one podcast to one speaker, one other person in my life, one coach, one sponsor, one, friend. And it's just been such an incredible journey. So first, I want to start with somewhere around 2017, I want to say, when my family had an intervention with me. They sat me down and they all, my grandmother, my parents, my sisters, they all sat me down and said, "We think you have a drinking problem and you absolutely need to get help." This was after the DUI, and this was around the time I had, been released from the psych ward, and all these consequences had been happening to me. And my grandma drove me to a few AA meetings because my license was revoked, I think, at the time. And I remember she dropped me off in her minivan and was like, "You get out and go to that meeting." I love my grandma, but she was very serious about this. And I really didn't have a good experience my first few meetings. And again, I felt forced. It was like family would drive me, I would get out, and they would be like, "We're not coming back to get you until the meeting's over." I had no choice. My very first AA meeting, this old crusty dude leaned on me, sat so close to me, and was showing me pictures of his dog on his phone the whole meeting. And I was just like, "Barf, who are these people?" And then another meeting I went to was at my church, and I remember going in, and it was late at night. It was dark. There was only 3 women, including me. So there was just 3 of us. And there was a lot of silence. And I would speak up and start jibber jabbering, and they would say, "No, you can't talk. There's no crosstalk." And I just remember thinking, how does anyone get sober in these meetings? These are terrible. And fast forward as a little time had gone on, and I of course deteriorated even further. It was a new level of desperation. They call it the gift of desperation. for a reason, because it took that much time moving forward for me to rediscover recovery. And I had bought this book, The Recovering by Leslie Jamison. It's intoxication and its aftermath. And I don't know what really prompted me to buy it, besides that I knew I had to get started somewhere on this journey. And, a book sometimes just falls off the shelf. And I took it home and I started reading it. And this book changed my life because it was written by a writer who was Ivy League educated. And she was telling stories of other literary figures and artists who were struggling with addiction. And it was John Berryman and David Foster Wallace and Raymond Carver, even Billie Holiday. I mean, there were stories in there about Billie Holiday being arrested for her drug use and handcuffed to her hospital bed. And it was like every page I turned, like I was in the book, because I have always had a really strong reverence for writers. And I felt like I was just in it with all of them. It is a brilliantly written book. And she catalogs a variety of artistic human beings and their struggles. But, this book is in my hands right now as I'm recording this, and it's still underlined and weathered. And sometimes when I read the passages, they actually give me chills, and I just clutch it tightly to my chest. I know that sounds corny, but I can see myself back in 2018 sitting on my front porch, just reading every single word. For the first time, really truly being engrossed in a book, especially about recovery. I mean, during that time, my mental health was so bad and I was so manic that I even had a hard time reading. So for me to be so captivated by a book and to be able to sit quietly and take in the words, that was a miracle itself. And I look back at that time and it's like nothing but divine intervention. That was my spiritual awakening. And my sober date is 2/10/18. And I am looking back right now at my journal, dated 4/17/18. So a couple months where I had been at home by myself. I gave up drinking because I was giving up on life. And I had realized it wasn't going to be better if I was drunk or not. It was all shit. No matter what, my life was garbage. It was a pure dumpster fire. And at that point, it was well, I might as well not drink. But I had no plan of recovery. I didn't know a single human in recovery. And I feverishly took notes in this book. And there's a passage in there where Leslie Jamison talks about Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. And it was the exact messaging I needed at the time. And I'm going to read to you what I wrote in my journal. It's written right out of the book. She says, Leslie Jamison says this on reading the novel Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, which was thought to be a very smart book. The novel had metabolized recovery with so much rigor. It had already asked all my questions and weathered all my intellectual discomforts. It documented what it called the grudging move toward maybe acknowledging this unromantic, unhip, cliched AA thing, so unlikely and unpromising. This goofy, slapdash, anarchic system of low-rent gatherings and corny slogans and saccharine grins and hideous coffee. And she says, well, first of all, it was church basement coffee, and it was an infusion of anonymous and unqualified love. But there was a double consciousness, both interrogating and affirming AA, investigating its labor, its oddness and its sublimity, questioning the recitations of recovery, but still alive to the miracles and not afraid to say so. And I remember writing that down and thinking, wow, that's the first time anyone ever put it that way. Mocking, but yet alive to its miracles, just like she wrote. And I remember closing that book and going to an AA meeting. The first AA meeting I went to based on my own willingness and decision. I closed that book. I found one of those AA pamphlets, or I found it online. I can't remember. And I literally told my husband, hey, I'm going to go to an AA meeting. There was a noon meeting that day. And it was in our local Alano club. And I went. And I was maybe a couple months sober, but it was all white knuckling. It was pure depression on my part. Like I had just no hope. And I walked into this AA meeting. It was not my first, because remember, I had been forced to go to a couple and I had already decided I hated AA. But I went into this meeting and it was packed, like just crowded and warm and stuffy and people everywhere. But there was a calmness in me. And I sat down and a woman told a story about getting a DUI in the child drop-off line for school on pure mouthwash. And instead of being shocked or appalled, it was like something clicked in me and I just said, yep, I belong here. Again, the messaging was exactly what I needed at the time. It was like a divine intervention. And at that time, it felt so freeing to say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. My life's a mess and I surrender. And so I went to AA in-person meetings for probably the first 2.5 years of my recovery. And it saved my life. I met my first sponsor, my only sponsor. She took me through the steps. And I remember she made me go to 90 meetings in 90 days just to get me into the habit and also for me to investigate the landscape of AA. So I couldn't just say, well, I went to that meeting and it was stupid. She's like, well, there's a whole bunch more meetings. You're going to go to every single one of them. I don't even care. She's awesome. She's a psych nurse like me, and that's why I chose her. I also chose her because she drove a BMW and she had really white teeth. And at the time they said, find someone who has what you want. And I was like, I want what she has. I was such a mess. But I remember she walked laps with me around our local lake. Like we have this walking trail, laps and laps for like an entire summer while I just spilled my guts. I will never forget that time because it saved my life. I mean, I have no other words for it than it saved my life. And she took me through the 12 steps of AA. And I worked through every single step with her, journaling, praying, telling her every horrible thing I did. And we would often end up like either crying or in fits of laughter, but she was brutally honest with me about her own story. And it was exactly what I needed at the time. And let me just say here, I don't give a hoot nanny. I don't give a hoot nanny how you get sober. I lead recovery meetings today, and I say this out loud. I don't care if your method of sobriety is to hula hoop and drink pickle juice. Find something that works and don't stop until you're free. So if I continue on with my own journey, I went to AA, like I said, for about 2.5 years in the beginning. I never missed a day. And then the pandemic hit and all the in-person meetings closed. And I found the Luckiest Club, started by Laura McKowen, who is the author of We Are the Luckiest. And these meetings were online. They were 7 days a week. And it was basically open forum. It wasn't 12-step recovery or smart recovery. It was just kind of come as you are. There's an open share. And it changed my life again. And my very first TLC is what we call it. My very first TLC meeting, I cried because it was like, this was the messaging I needed at this time. And Laura McKowen's famous for her 9 things. And it's like the preamble to the meetings. And she says, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I'm not going to go through all 9 things, but she says things like, it's unfair that this is your thing. But this is your thing, and it will never stop being your thing until you face it. And it was just language I really needed to hear because the AA messaging and the teachings, they taught me how to take ownership of my problem, how to get real humble and honest and surrender. But I still had a lot of pain and I had a lot of questions. So essentially, I felt like I had broken my own heart and something in the rooms of AA hadn't quite yet healed it. And I had this deep sadness in me that I covered with a tough armor. You know, I was okay calling myself an alcoholic. but none of it really truly felt like I had healed to the core. Like deep down under all the layers of anger, there was so much grief and disappointment and sadness and like pure devastation. It's like my soul still needed some healing and some reparenting. And so when I discovered these meetings in around 2020, this became my new normal. I entered in at about 2.5 years sober, and I went to TLC meetings every single day, multiple times a day. I became integrated with the community. I started finding people on social media, making friends, and it just became like season two of sobriety for me. And the one of the meeting hosts was Emily Paulson. These meetings were very large. They were like 200 or 300 people, and they were co-ed. And Emily broke off and started the Sober Mom Squad. And this was obviously a female-only group with smaller meetings. And I hope to have Emily on the pod someday, actually. And this kind of catapulted me into another recovery group and like the beginnings of another season. And at the time, I discovered the book Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. And I listened to this book on repeat around year like 3 of sobriety because it showed up in my life again exactly when I needed to hear it. I was open to new ideas about sobriety. And all I had known at the time was what everyone said in AA, which was if you leave the room, you're going to relapse and die. And so I didn't know a lot about recovery, and I still I felt a little bit fear-mongered, but also hopeful that there was more to come for me. And so year 3 was like Quit Like a Woman year. It just highly resonated. And I had never heard anyone say, like, at some point, you can trust yourself again. This was also a point in my life when, my husband was still drinking, our marriage was still rocky. I felt really disempowered, and something still felt like, I had no choice but to get sober because I was in the monitoring program and because, my family was still pushing me. And just something about that time, I just felt very cratered. And, her whole premise of the book in Quit Like a Woman is that AA is created for men. And she's not wrong. But I remember around that time, I sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater. I just like went on this big feminist kick, and it was 3.5 years sober. And so this is another topic I can dive deeper into at another time. I just wanted to mention this as part of my timeline. Maybe I can even get Holly to come on the pod. I think she's a brilliant woman, and she impacted so many millions and still does with this book. But I'm going to tell you what not to do with this book is to go to a party of all your AA friends and say something obnoxious about AA when it saved all their lives too. And so that's what I did. And everybody in the room just looked at me baffled and never invited me back. And that's when I started to realize, like, I couldn't escape or ignore that was a big part of my story, that AA, the rooms of AA, the 12 steps, that I couldn't ignore that it had saved my life. And I realized I had just sort of evolved past the messaging. And maybe even that word evolved past isn't the right word, because I would carry it all with me still. But I felt like I needed something a little bit more. I was really curious. I wanted to learn more. So I guess it wasn't so much that I outgrew AA. I don't think that's what it is. It's that my personal path guided me elsewhere. And thank God it did, because around that time I was hitting a wall and I needed to find TLC and Sober Mom Squad. And I needed to find sober Instagram and all these other things. I tell my clients today, like, the goal is for you to outgrow me. The goal is for you to hit a wall with me where you say, okay, Kate, I can't learn anything else from you. Like, I'm firing you. I outgrew you. I don't want someone to work with me forever and ever. I love my clients, but please outgrow me at some point. So yeah, around 3 or 4 years sober, I just had so much support from the online sober community. I think at about 3.5 years, I found the Sober Curator, the online magazine that I started a fashion blog for, and I became really involved with the group of sober curators. Again, saved my life. I mean, one of my best friends on the planet is Elise Bryson, who is the editor of the Sober Curator. she lives like an hour from me. In all the United States, she's right there. And so it's a total God shot. And the Sober Curator team is a group that is a mix of people who are in 12-step or various recovery methods. And, we really started to recover out loud as a group and put it out there on social media, like, so we're not boring, hashtag like recover out loud. And I remember when I turned my Instagram to public, like as soon as I clicked, I toggled over to like your profile is public. I like hid because I thought Oprah was knocking at my door any minute. I thought the whole world was interested in whether I was sober out loud. I certainly thought the whole world was interested in my Instagram, and they weren't. But I just remember that period of time. It was like ripping off this Band-Aid of, I am not going to be anonymous. I'm going to share with everyone. I'm a nurse. I'm in recovery. I'm not ashamed. I'm going to be sober out loud. And I felt really confident that was the right thing to do. I had a few years under my belt. And I tell people I had been classically trained in AA, but also been exposed to other groups. And I just felt really solid that I was ready to share this messaging. Around this time, I also got really curious. I wanted to know, as a nurse, what are we teaching professionals about addiction? What are we teaching doctors and nurses? Like, what's the quote official messaging? And I started reading a lot of books. I read, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and Gabor Mate, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and Dr. Mark Lewis, The Biology of Desire, and Dopamine Nation. I mean, so many books. Anything I could get my hands on, I started reading and really doing the research. And this is when I began studying to become a certified addiction RN, because I was working inpatient psych. And I really started paying attention to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for mental health disorders. And I realized that that's when they categorized alcohol use disorder on a spectrum as mild, moderate to severe, and that no one in my profession, no one in my oikos was using the word alcoholic. And it wasn't just that. It was that in my environment at work, we were taught that you will use person first language. Like, we don't say John's a schizophrenic. We say John is living with schizophrenia. John's identity isn't that he's a schizophrenic. His identity is not that he's a diabetic. John is a person experiencing or suffering from diabetes. He's experiencing homelessness. And this really taught me that, we are not our diagnosis. And so I took this to heart in how I identified with myself. Now, granted, I have no problem calling myself an alcoholic as like a slang term, but I'm in the industry now and I can't call clients alcoholics or addicts because that's considered like derogatory slang. I would certainly get noticed at work and probably called out, if not get in trouble. So I'm really conscious of that. And I remember posting about this on social media at one point and someone commenting that my content was, quote, too woke for them. And I was like, no, it's not woke. I'm a nurse and I'm a mental health professional. And that's the correct terminology. That's just what it is. I didn't make it up. And let me be clear, if there's a qualifier for being an alcoholic, like I qualify, right? I hit every bucket of being an alcoholic. I jokingly call myself an alcoholic still with my friends, my husband. But I don't really identify with that label anymore. It's not as empowering to me as it was when I first realized and first started saying it in the rooms of AA. It's not really empowering to me at all. It just doesn't feel like a true sense of the person that I am today. But today is 2024 and I am pushing 7 years of sobriety. So it's different. It's different now. And this is really individual for everyone. This is just my particular story. But I think about, every 7 years, every cell in your body dies and you literally become a new physical version of your body. So there is that piece of it. And there's also neuroplasticity. The brain can rewire as we get sober and we get into recovery. So we can rewire with talk therapy, with cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, like sitting in meetings over and over and over, we rewire our brain. And so there is that argument as well. And I'm going to talk more about that topic in another podcast. But as I learned how the brain works, it felt even more conceivable to me that, yeah, I don't have to call myself an alcoholic forever, even though, I mean, yes, it's a slang term. I get it. But hashtag we do recover. Like literally, physically, mentally, spiritually, we do recover. So whatever you want to call yourself, whatever is empowering to you, go for it. I have zero judgment. I don't even really have an opinion because I know it all evolves and changes as time goes on. In the last couple of years, I discovered Tommy Rosen, and this was another season of my recovery. And in fact, I told him on a live call, his group is called Recovery 2.0, and he coaches around, holistic yoga and recovery. And I said, if you're a Recovery 2.0, then I'm Recovery 1.0 because I'm not a yoga instructor, but I work with people usually in the early days of sobriety, and I really resonate with your messaging. And one of the things that I learned that Tommy Rosen had said that really struck me, again, another one of those moments where it was like exactly what I needed to hear at the time, was he said, if you're not evolving in your recovery, what are you even doing? He said, I don't encourage you to work the 12 steps and make them your life. I encourage you to work the 12 steps and then get a life. And that resonated with me. Every single person I've met on this journey has taught me something because I remain open and willing. And I know that I don't have all the answers. Like, I'm not God. I know that my recovery journey will be shifting. And, in another sense, I went through my quit like a woman phase where I was not ever going to go to AA again. But these days, when the AA haters come, I defend it because it saved my life. And yet I don't even go anymore. So it's all a part of how I got here. And I've learned to love it all, loving it all. I feel like the 12 steps are a spiritual doctrine that are as important as the Bhagavad Gita or A Course in Miracles. The 12 steps of AA saved my life, and that spiritual doctrine will always, always, always be important to me. That messaging will always be important to me. I personally feel like the 12 steps were like divinely inspired. No human could just sit down and write all that, impart that much wisdom without spiritual guidance, much like a lot of the other spiritual texts that we use to guide us today. So my recovery has really just gone all over the map over the years, and I've given myself the permission to explore and to educate myself and to stay curious. And like I said in the beginning, to follow the breadcrumbs. Because once I got a little more stable and my brain kind of came back to functioning, I began to trust myself again. And I began to trust my own intuition and have a sense of personal agency, which I hadn't had in a really long time. I also give myself a lot of grace on this recovery journey because tomorrow I could discover another thing that's going to crack me wide open in another area. These days, I am more spiritual than I've ever been in my entire life. And I haven't been inside the building of a church in a long time or inside the room of an AA meeting. But yet I believe in the 12 steps more than I ever have. So I constantly find myself in this place, pushing 7 years, where my concept of recovery is different than I ever expected it to be. The only constant is that it's going to evolve. And I hope I stay open-minded. I hope I continue to stay open-minded to where my heart feels called to go. And as you can see, what I continue to reiterate is that different messaging resonated with me in different seasons, and it will only continue, will never stop. So it certainly keeps evolving as I work with other people one-on-one in coaching. And my clients have taught me so much. It's like this beautiful dance with the universe, where it just brings up whatever I need to dive into more into a coaching session. I think about it, and someone says it in a session, and I get really clear on how I feel, and I'm able to look at it from all sides, and I do more research. And it's just this beautiful, like universally guided experience in coaching where my clients just bring me exactly what I need, and we're able to navigate things together. And I feel like I learn from them. And, I've also, as I've become a coach and worked with other people, it's pushed me to further explore things that I otherwise couldn't have explained. Because they say, as a coach, you can't take anyone further than you've gone yourself. And I'm certainly not one of those coaches who says, like, oh, sobriety, it's super easy. Like, here's my tips and tricks. Like, dude, you can Google that. You don't need tips and tricks. And as of right now, there's only a few things I'm sure of that are the essential ingredients when I work with clients. And I list those as the acronym WAC for what I call the faucets of freedom. WAC meaning W for willingness. The client has to come to me absolutely willing to put in the work. And the H in WAC's for humor, humility, honesty. Of course, the A is for abstinence. You got to be abstinent. And the C is for consistency. And I'm going to go further into these faucets of freedom in the next episode, so I won't belabor that now. But that is what I know for sure. That is what I know for sure needs to happen on a sobriety journey. And I love that the journey continues on. I love that I get to be a part of this. So to sum this all up, it's been quite the evolution of myself. And there is no wrong way or right way. It's an ongoing journey. This was just my personal experience. And I will say, I am more grateful to getting sober and staying sober in this entire journey than I am anything in my life. It is the single most important thing to me in the entire world. Like, it comes before everything. Marriage, family, career, everything. My recovery comes first. And so, geez, I have so much more to say, but I'm going to end it here. Thanks for tuning in. You can find me on my website at katevitella.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at katevitella. I would love to hear from you. Any feedback or questions, shoot me a note. So until next time, peace within and bullshit out.